offers an excellent piece to do just that, particularly with these two high-profile individuals who had a book go to number one thanks to being pumped on CNN and MSNBC and in the D.C. press corps generally. I'm talking about David Korn from Mother Jones and Michael Isikoff from Yahoo News. Their book, Russian Roulette, The Inside Story of Putin's War on America and the Election of Donald Trump. In that book, they made a connection between the primary source of the Steele dossier, Igor Danchenko, now under indictment for lying to the FBI, and a Belarus-American businessman named Sergei Milian. The assertion was that Milian was the source of the allegations that the Kremlin had a blackmail tape of Trump with prostitutes. They wrote in their book, Milian would come to play an oversized role in the Trump-Russia story by making sensational and unverified claims about what had gone on inside a Moscow hotel room. But that's false. Milian played no such role. He provided no such information. In fact, in the wake of the Durham revelations with the indictment of Danchenko, the Washington Post, Washington/Amazon Post, has retracted or corrected sections of no fewer than 14 stories about Milian and the dossier, writes Sperry. The Wall Street Journal, which first made the connection based on a single anonymous source in January 2017 story by its Pulitzer-winning reporter Mark Marmont, now concedes that the indictment raises serious questions about its reporting. It does more than that. ABC News aired a 2017 story by former correspondent Brian Ross, identifying Milian as a key dossier source, said it's reviewing its reporting in light of new developments. Oh, wonderful. And yet, Isikoff and Korn won't cop to it. They sort of brush it off. Oh, the dossier is a mixed record. Korn actually went so far as to write a piece last month in Mother Jones essentially saying what you hear from the likes of Adam Schiff. Just because the dossier turned out to be untrue doesn't mean the Russiagate narrative is false, that Trump was, in fact, cozying up to Russia and betraying the United States. They persist, which is why it's so important to correct the record, to go through what they've said and what they propagated for, well, the entirety of Trump's presidency, really, and frankly, pre-presidency. Important to correct the record and continue to prosecute the truth in the light of, in the face of these propagandists like Isikoff and Korn, before we get to any discussion about Biden's policy with respect to Russia. But for more on that and this, what I've just referenced, we're pleased to be joined by Mark Montgomery, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Mark, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you very much, Dan and Amy. Appreciate being with you.
Well, so before we get to the potential invasion of Ukraine by Putin, your comment on all that was said and done, no evidence, and yet the push from the likes of Korn and Isikoff persists, particularly Korn. Trump was too cozy with Putin. He, betrayed the United States. Is there any evidence to support that claim, past or present?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is an enormous Russian disinformation campaign against our mainstream media generally fell for. And that should cause them to step back and take a hard look at how they verify facts when it involves people who they politically disagree with, because that's what happened here clearly, is the Russians found a weakness, exploited it, and it put us in, put the first year of the president's term in absolute turmoil and limited his ability to get what he had intended to do in his presidency accomplished.
Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, speaking of all the forces allied against President Trump, he penned an op-ed in New York Times this week. And remember, he's supposed to be an expert in this area. He writes that Biden's talk with Putin last week opened the door to exactly the kind of discussion that's needed, the discussion uh, of European and Russian security concerns, and for Russia, NATO encroachment and ballistic missile defense. Uh, in particular, he writes, the question remains whether Russia is prepared to walk through the door and reconsider its position on conventional arms control agreements, such as the Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty. Does Vindman have this right that that conversation between Biden and Putin has opened the door to the kind of discussion that could move Putin off of his revanchist desires?
I doubt that strongly. And I'll say, anytime you walk into a meeting because someone is effectively blackmailing you by leaving 100,000 troops on their border with a partner, and is supporting a revolutionary movement within, fighters within eastern Ukraine to undermine the legitimate government of Ukraine, and is constantly looking for ways to undermine not just the sovereignty but the democratic institutions of Ukraine. That kind of blackmail is not what should bring you to the table. That should have brought us to the table with Europe to discuss what Europe is going to do about economic sanctions against Russia should they continue this malfeasance.
Well, if Russia invades Ukraine, how soon until China invades Taiwan?
Well, I think we're going to lose a lot of credibility if Russia invades Ukraine. I think that's different than, say, Russia invading a NATO country, but it still demonstrates that the U.S. and its allies and partners, which are one of our strengths, can't get our act together. And I'm particularly worried about the Europeans' inability to see Russian energy blackmail, Russia's attempts to parlay influence in their countries. They've run significant disinformation operations campaigns throughout Western Europe. We need to get allies in there. And you're absolutely right. Once we lose that credibility, then if you're Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, do we look like a reliable ally if a partner like Ukraine, who's been filing paperwork to try to join NATO over the last 7 years, is suddenly subject to an invasion by an authoritarian state for the second time in 7 years?
Speaking of credibility with the Chinese communists, do we really think that they are delicate actors? Should we really be concerned about their feelings? Are they concerned about their feelings? And I ask this because of this ridiculous event where a video feed at Biden's Summit for Democracy last week was cut when a Taiwanese digital minister showed a map on screen in her slide presentation that had Taiwan as a different color than China, indicating they're separate countries. And so they cut the feed so as not to offend the Chinese. This is the same administration that just said we're a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics, but we're worried that they could be offended by a slide presentation from some Taiwanese digital minister. I mean, what is this?
Well, first of all, this is embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the United States that we would coddle China. We shouldn't be coddling China. We should be deterring China. And the map that was shown was actually a map produced, by one of these foundations that studies democracy. And the difference in color was based on the difference in openness, transparency, and the rule, the rule of law in Taiwan versus China. It was the absolute appropriate map to have up at a democracy, meeting, and it was absolutely fine for the Taiwan side. That if we didn't like that map, we should have spoken to the Taiwan government after the fact. But to cut the feed and go to a video, to an audio only feed, was really churlish and small-minded of us, and it again demonstrated that we are not the reliable ally and partner that the East Asian nations are hoping for, and we need to act a little more responsibly in that regard. That was a mistake. I hope it was made by a junior person like there's reporting, because it was made by a senior person that should bother us more. And but the idea that it was a technical fault is ludicrous because it only happened to one throughout all these briefings. It only happened to one country. It only happened after one slide showed up. So I think we all can understand it was on purpose. I hope it wasn't done at the very senior levels because that shows a sense of fecklessness that we cannot afford in our senior leaders.
Are we still concerned at all about the Biden administration, speaking of being compromised and the false allegations against Trump, evidence-free allegations at least? Are we concerned at all about this pending FBI investigation into Hunter Biden and his business relationships with the Chinese? Miranda Devine of the New York Post has a new book about all the findings on his laptop and the relationships with, senior level Chinese communists. Are we at all concerned the Biden administration is compromised because of Hunter Biden's business dealings and whatever the big guy was going to get as a result of some of those business dealings?
So I don't know the specifics of Hunter Biden, but I will tell you that we should be concerned about our businesses, like that proposed joint venture that get in bed with the Chinese, because the transfer of our intellectual property has weakened our military and has undermined our economic position over the last 25 years. And the last bastion of can't we just all get along with China and we're all misunderstanding the intent of the Chinese Communist Party really exists in our business community, where they see the opportunity for short-term, return on investment over the long-term security, not just of the United States, but of their own country, their own company. I mean, when these companies, do these kind of ventures, you end up inevitably losing your intellectual property to the Chinese partner, who suddenly starts building a significantly cheaper and only slightly worse widget that looks just like the one you were doing. And so I'm really worried about this, and I'm worried about the lack of attention this gets in our business community.
He is Mark Montgomery, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Mark, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dan and Amy.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
I want Christmas. Just give me plain baby Jesus lying in a manger. Christmas.
On AM 560, The Answer.
I've got the perfect place for you for that perfect holiday gift. Mike Gallagher here, inviting you to give a gift from Roland's Jewelers. Create that magical holiday moment. Buying jewelry is about trust. Well, Roland's Jewelers in downtown Libertyville is a place you can trust. I do. I'm a customer. Visit Roland's